Okay, so for our book, we were assigned Queen Bees and Wannabees, and it's by Rosalind Wiseman. And my name is Kaylee Mylan, and this is
Hannah Sturgill.
And we're just going to be talking about general things that are going on with middle school girls and how everything that's affecting them is basically stuff that's happening around them. And so first off, we're going to be talking about technology and how the stuff that they're able to see in the media and stuff like that is just right there at their fingertips with their phones and stuff and computers and the stuff that they have access to, and how the information that they're getting is so easy for them to hide and things like that. So it's really, it provides like constant updates, constant pictures, constant things that these kids in middle school and younger are not supposed to be seeing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And just how they're getting it at a younger and younger age. And that's one thing that really is happening, because there are children that I've seen who are in third grade having cell phones, and that's just not okay.
Mm-hmm. No, and everything is made so public with cell phones. I mean, it's hard now to keep anything private, and then I mean, this even goes into taking pictures. I mean, once you post a picture, it's there. And in the first chapter, I mean, it straight up addresses sexting and how, you know, it's a way for girls to be thrilled and compromise their feelings and to, you know, almost be considered at that level with a boy, but actually not actually doing the act. And like I said, it's a thrill, but it's also like a lot of pressure to do it and to impress other people.
I think an impression is a big part of that, because it is, especially with like sexting becoming so prominent, there are things where it's like they're getting pressured into doing things, and it's something at that age, or really any age, they shouldn't have to do, but I think it's considered to be the cool thing to do. Is if you're going to be able to go through and actually be able to go through with it, then you're going to be seen as popular. And that's one thing that's on all middle school girls' minds. I mean, let's be honest. So
That's true.
Yeah, and like it says in chapter 2, it's going into how like these things are occurring so much younger, like starting in age, I think it referenced back to 7 in like 4th and 5th grade, like getting cell phones, being able to go into use the internet in all these ways and having all this access to just the things of this world that some of them shouldn't be seeing at all. It's like you go on Google and you just type in like cantaloupe, and you never know what you're gonna get. Like, it's gonna be something completely insane.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I mean, and even in schools they have all this access, and I mean, teachers have to completely monitor what kids are doing if they use technology in the classroom, and it's ridiculous how much pressure there is to be somebody you're not and to impress other people. And you know, and then it turns into cliques. Oh, well, I'm friends with so, and because you're such good friends, you're gonna make up a secret language, or you know, you're gonna do all this. You know, well, we're in the best friends club, and we're gonna have inside jokes, and then that's when it starts to become bullying to other people, because other kids start to feel like, oh, well, I'm not best friends with them, and then their inside jokes. And other things start to become internalized, and girls just feel like they're on the outside. And then that's how like a lot of bullying starts. Is, you know, I feel like some of it's unintentional, and obviously a lot of it, or some of it, can be intentional.
Yeah, and it can be super manipulative. Like,
yes,
that is one thing, because like it was saying was, at least for me, like there were girls like in our clique who would be like, oh, they're talking about me behind my back, I shouldn't be friends with them anymore. And that would just start to pull apart those friend groups. And that's such a big thing that's going through middle school girls' minds. Like, oh, I need to fit in with this group. This is my in group. They're the ones who I'm going to be best friends with all through like life. But we all know that that's probably not going to be true. And it's just starting to like, their emotions are so heightened right now. It's starting to pull apart, like, oh, they're talking about me, they're teasing me, they must not like me. Or, oh, they're teasing me, that must means that I'm going to fit in with them. Like, if I stick with them, that means they're talking about me.
Exactly.
And it just, I feel like if they stay in with the cliques, then they're going to feel like, oh, it's even no matter how bad it is, as long as I'm popular.
Right.
That's something that is main focus in their head, and that was
For sure.
what they started to talk about in chapter 3.
Mm-hmm.
How like the cliques would reinforce them and create the bonds that they needed to make them feel like they fit in.
Right. Well, and then that popularity turns into like good popularity is when that girl is just everybody's friend and everybody likes her. And then it can turn into like a mean popularity when kids start to become grateful that she's nice to them,
Mm-hmm.
or they're terrified when she gets offended by them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really fine line, especially like the older you get. Maybe not so much into like 4th and 5th grade because students are still trying to figure out sarcasm and how that all works.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm going to reference back to one of the articles that I found.
Sure.
It's called What Moms Tell Middle School Girls About Middle School. And it's by Carrie Kampakis. And basically what she did was she took a word and she used a single word to describe middle school. And she used the word fluid. Which that was like, whoa. But
Okay.
it's true. Like everything is changing. Everything's
Yep.
mixing together. Everything's going whichever way. And there's no solidification there. There's nothing that's solid in their life. And that's what's causing all this distress. Like, oh, I need to fit in with this group. I need to fit in with this group. Does it mean am I going to have to go over my ethical boundaries and be mean
Exactly.
in order to fit in? Or am I going to be able to remain like the good person that I know that I am? And that's just something like that she touched on, was that the jealousy and the comparison and the fear of being able to fit in, that rejection is just so heightened in their age right now.
Yeah. Well, and like in my article, Too Cool for School, it talks about like children who are disruptive in class or who do it to get attention, or students who are considered cool. In the long term, they end up sacrificing their academic reputation and even like their academic abilities, because they become so engrossed with being popular and being in a certain clique and having the approval of others that they spend time trying to figure out how they can do that instead of actually spending time on their schoolwork that really will, affect, them getting to college or them being able to do certain things.
Mm-hmm. And I think with the popularity that's coming in, I think it's funny how like in the Queen Bees and Wannabees, they started to talk about like the different types of people within the popularity spectrum. Like,
right.
One was like the Queen Bee, and that's like the one who was on top. And since, like today's October 3rd, Mean Girls Day, I mean, it just kind of made me think about that and how all that stuff. But like Queen Bee is like the one who's on top. She's the one who everything revolves around her. Everything, she makes all the decisions. She's the one who's not intimidated by anybody. And she's the one who likes to be the center of attention, but won't take responsibility.
Right.
If she hurts someone's feeling or causes any disruption to anybody, but she will feel wronged if anybody tries to push her out of her position.
Oh yeah.
And that's, yeah.
And then there's always those other people who are either try to really suck up to her, and then there's other people who want to be accepted but also know that some of the things she does it goes against their personal ethical predispositions. And that's being in that position is hard because they're still in the same crisis as the Queen Bee, but it's definitely a different perspective, and it's a really hard place to be.
Yeah. And there's those ones who, the Queen Bee relies on them to go and get all of her information,
right,
and stuff like that in order to go out and get the gossip, to get stuff like that, in order to let herself feel like she's supposed to fit into this group.
Right.
And she'll basically do anything in order to fit in and be under the Queen Bee, just because she knows that there's that popularity that rises with that.
Yeah.
And she'll just be able to do anything. She doesn't care who she hurts. She doesn't care what happens, just in order for her to be able to be considered popular.
Right.
And all that.
Well, and I think, there's definitely a spectrum of what's considered high social status and then what's considered low. And then, there's definitely this group in between who are a mixture of, high social status and then, but also, are low social status. I feel like when I was going through middle school, it wasn't always black and white between who was what. There were a lot of different groups. And I went to middle school, in the Pacific Northwest, and so a lot of us, our social groups were pretty fluid. It wasn't like, how it can be in the South sometimes of you're either like a redneck or a prep.
Yeah.
And so I never really experienced the whole black and white, lines until I moved to South Georgia. And that was a really big culture shock for me.
Yeah. Mine was kind of the same way. As like I went to 3 different middle schools, and they were all ranging from Tennessee to Michigan to Georgia to everywhere. And every single one, there was a huge gray area, kind of like you were talking about. There was, you had the populars. You had the quote-unquote losers.
Right.
You had the ones who didn't fit in. And then there was just this giant, 80% of the people in middle school were the ones in the middle who didn't fit into anything. They were still trying to figure out, which way on the spectrum they went, whether they were going to fall more towards popular and fall more towards the loser spectrum. But those are the ones who typically became the ones who the popular kids picked on. And that was something that was really big with us because, they were unsure about it, so they're an easy target.
Right.
And that was something that happened. But really it was the ones who you could tell, the different social statuses just by the way people looked.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing in mine. Was
which school was that at?
That was it was the one in Michigan. The one up north. And
wow.
It was weird because the ones who were the popular, more uppity people were the ones who they had good hygiene. They were the ones who looked really nice. They were the ones who were really the popular ones were the smart ones, which was weird. It was a weird contrast and all that. And the ones who all the guys went for, they were the ones who would flaunt themselves in order to make people like them. And then the low social status, the area that I was in was more gang related, really. Yeah. So we had the people who relied on their gangs, and they were more dressed really weird. They didn't. Yeah, they were super, super buff, masculine people who were very intimidating, but they were still on the lower spectrum. And that was just a complete opposition of when I moved to Tennessee and had, like you said, the rednecks and the preps and all that stuff. And,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and closer towards the towards chapter 5 in the beginning, is congeniality and the whole concept of putting yourself down in order to not look vain and in order to not appear as though you want all these compliments, to put yourself down and to put others up. I feel like that's something that we definitely carry into adulthood. And it's this habit we create, and it's really hard to break. And you see girls in our generation and even younger, that have a hard time accepting a compliment. And even, in relationships, people get frustrated because it's just let me compliment you. Can't you just take this compliment because this is how I feel about you? Yeah. And you dismissing my compliment to you is offensive. And I really feel like that's something that, we struggle in high school and college and, and sometimes even into the workplace.
Yeah. I think a lot of that falls back on, we as humans worry about our reputations too much. And that's something that was big in middle school for us. For me, it was or at least in the book, even, it talked about how, we're worrying about our reputations because that's dangerous for girls because they, the gossip. Everything is what's influencing that. And that causes there to be so many different types of reputations that you're worried about. You have people who are worried about being the center of attention, the ones who are worried about fitting in with all the girls and being girly and all that, and the ones who are oh wait, girls are too much drama, let me go in and fit with the guys. I'm going to have all these guy friends and stuff like that. And then you have the ones who just don't fit in anywhere. Right. And fall completely out of that spectrum. And I think the reputations is just something that is even carries on, like you said, into today's world. And that's something that is still very prominent even in college. I've noticed that too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And then
okay, so I believe it's in chapter 7, but throughout the book, the author mentions the Act Like a Woman box, and from my own experience of reading books and all kinds of stuff, I realized that when we're that young, we put all of these things into our Act Like a Woman box, and then the older we get, the less we remember to take certain things out. And one of the things was learning how to deal with our anger. That a lot of times, girls our age, we internalize things, and then we give like the silent treatment, or we'll eventually all these things blow up. It's like a snowball effect, and then all of a sudden it blows up in our face and in other people's faces, and they're like, whoa, where did all this come from? And it's because from when we were younger, in middle school and adolescence, learning to put all of our things in order and learn how to get out our frustration and anger. We didn't learn how to do that correctly. And so now, even in my adult relationships, I'm learning how to voice my anger, voice my frustrations, instead of keeping it all inside.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we have to do, is we have to keep learning on ways to combat against these things. And so I found a couple of articles that kind of reference back to that. But one is one called BFF, Frenemies, and Mean Girls, and it's by Whitney Joyner. And she really talks about how one thing to do to combat against all these issues is basically to have a mentor, or get a mentor for your daughter, whether that's you personally, whether that's someone close to you who you know will be a good influence on her, someone that she'll be able to reference back to and just be able to explain her issues to. And for me, that was my youth pastor. That was someone I was just able to talk to. And then another one I found was called Navigating the Rocky Roads of Girls' Friendships. And it's by Kirsten Jones Neff, which was a great title. I loved it. But the one thing that she really hit on was, don't try to provide a solution for every situation your daughter's going to encounter, or the girls are going to encounter, even as a teacher. The things that you're going to see that these girls are going to be going through. There's not going to be a solution for every single thing. But one thing that we can do is basically encourage the parents or talk to the students to distract them with an outside activity, such as sports or music or things like that. And just basically provide that way for them to be able to go and take away some of the thoughts of the drama and stuff that is going around them. And, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I also found 2 articles as well that deal with the same topics, and the first one is Popularity Differentially Predicts Reactive and Proactive Aggression in Early Adolescence. And the basis of the whole research project was those students with a good and dependent support system ended up becoming more popular because of their higher level of proactive aggression in their middle grades instead of a reactive aggression. Those who tended to be more reactive in their responses to certain situations became less popular as the year went on, versus those who were more proactive, and in turn those students who were actually more proactive had a good support system at home that helped uphold them to higher standards and to good morals and such things. And then my third article was Ethics During Adolescence, a social networks perspective. And the basis of their study was just that adolescents who demonstrate ethical predispositions and risky behaviors are trying to find a balance between assimilation and individuation. And those students who have closer relationships within their peer group tend to engage in more risky behaviors, instead of those who have a peer mentor, who can keep them grounded, who won't, or who will discourage them from acting in risky behaviors.
All right, well, I think that wraps up our podcast. Thank you for listening.